Welcome to Make Your Own Fun. I am here with Los Angeles artist and poet Billy Burgos. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This is long overdue.
Agreed. Agreed.
Man, I just wanted to even have you on, back in the day just for, poetry, but, circumstances being what they are and everything from the last couple of years and me having to, let's just say, move when I didn't really want to move, where I wanted to move, how I wanted to move, and as many times as I've had to move. I didn't know if I would still be doing a podcast, so I feel really
Yeah.
lucky that I can still reach out to people and still do that. So I guess as the entry point for a lot of people, because they're going to know if they've seen the book, read the book, my shameless plugging of the book. Because I feel like not only is it for me and my experience, but your amazing cover art and your illustrations, everything that April Skies has done, the great forward by Amelie Frank, the blurbs by Sandoval, Kevin Ridgway. It's just, there were a lot of cooks in this kitchen, I think, to help make this pie of this book. And I'm happy to report for people watching this that may not already know that $1 from every book purchase go to familypromise.org, and we've already made one donation, and hopefully once a month or so we'll be making more. And I guess my question for you, Billy, is how and when did April Skies reach out to you about the Leaving Long Beach project?
Ooh, how and when? Well, I've known April for a while, just through the poetry community. I'm sure she's seen a lot of my covers. Like I've worked with Punk Hostage Press for a while. Just different independent, self-published poets, writers. And I'm always promoting my stuff. Like, social media promotion is kind of like the way to go these days. So she just reached out to me just via Facebook. I think it might have been Instagram. I don't remember, actually. My memory is not working.
Well, it was a long time ago now.
But at some point, maybe about 6 months ago, we kind of started talking about it. And she mentioned you were doing a book and kind of what the subject was. And honestly, man, I'll be honest with you. I work with poets that I kind of like their stuff. Like, I have a hard time putting energy towards a project where I don't really see eye to eye with it. I mean, it's kind of just the way it is. So when she talked about your work and what the subject matter was, I thought, yeah, this is something I can get behind. And, for me as an artist, it takes me a while to work up the energy to work on a project. So I told her, let me think about it, and thought about it for a while. And she reapproached me and said, hey, is this something you think you want to do? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And I'm always working, so it's for me, it's a lot of scheduling issues also. Like, how do I squeeze this in? Summers are usually pretty busy for me, so I just kind of like worked on it in between some other projects that I had going on. And I didn't really know you that well at that time. I mean, I'd heard of you. I think we've been friends on Facebook for years, but never knew you personally. So I kind of met you more so through your work than anything else. And once I started reading what your poems were about, I really kind of got the energy and thought it was a great project to get behind. So that's
I really appreciate it because I think especially when we came across, I think maybe the three of us had a meeting of the minds of saying, like, the through line was just the movement, the walking, the traveling, and the backpack was kind of just, for lack of a better term, I mean, I've had a lot of people ask me, you know, like, how do you rationalize and how do you think about it? And I said, well, the PCPG version of it is, well, let's just say it's a long camping trip that I was wanting to end every fucking day. But if I put myself in that mindset of like what I needed was in that backpack, you know, the laptop, the notebook, the bottle of water or a thermos or first aid stuff, whatever I could kind of cobble together, you know, the Swiss Army knife,
Yeah.
you know, stuff from I got from General Relief or EBT or whatever.
Mhm.
And I've noticed that ever since I went through that, you know, the institution system and, you know, being through the multiple shelters, that I tried when I got into that system to say like, well, how are you guys getting through it and social services, this and that. And then when it blew my mind when I would try to talk to not just the younger guys, but people who were new to it when I was still trying to get out of it, and there was this resistance of like, I don't need you, man, I don't need your help, and I don't need your BS. And all. It's like, okay, man, like all I can do is give you the tools, and these
Yeah.
tools are free, but it's not coming from a place of high and mighty because, dude, we're both homeless. Like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Exactly.
understand, like, I've been doing it a couple months. This is what worked for me, might not work for you. I'm not trying to project onto you, but this is what got me through. And I got to tell you, like when I first saw that image of the backpack that I think that you did that April sent to me, and I was staying with my friend Christine at the time last year, and it kind of brought tears to my eye. And
Really?
yeah, it was one of those things where you know it when you know it, like whether
Mhm.
it's an album cover or a book cover or a movie poster or something, there's that one image where you're like, that's it,
Yeah.
that's what it is. In fact, I don't know if she told you, but she sent me this framed picture of it here.
Wow. No, that's the first time I'm seeing that.
You know, I got
Wow.
a little reflection here from the ring light.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
that looks really nice.
Yeah, and I have it up on my wall here, and I don't have, you know, too much going on here. You can hear the echo about the furniture that I don't have.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wanted to thank you about that, and I just feel like you do so much for the community at large, and I guess I'll just ask you because you spoke about it a little bit. So, because of your connections and the poetry and artist community, do people constantly reach out to you about creating work for them? Like, if you're at a gallery of showing for your paintings or your sketches, or at an open mic, are people just like, hey Billy, and you're just like, or sometimes are you just like, man, I just want to have a coffee and just watch the show? I'm not saying you're like you're Bob Dylan and you walk into a room and people are like, Billy.
You know what? Okay, let's go back a little. Like 2012, actually yesterday was the 12-year anniversary of my poetry collection. So it's 2012 and I'm doing all this poetry, man. I mean, I'm hosting a reading at Beyond Baroque at that time. I'm doing stuff with Last Bookstore downtown. So all this poetry stuff is going on. And at that time, very few people knew that I was a illustrator. You know, everybody just kind of knew me from the poetry world. So I really wanted to get back into the art stuff. And I think I was doing a reading at Avenue 50 in Highland Park at the time, also. Kind of off and on going there. But the gallery side of Avenue 50 was a part I always wanted to get into. And the curator, actually, I think she's the owner. She never knew that I was an artist. Like, I just never talked about it. I guess I didn't have a lot of confidence in my work at the time. So, a friend of mine that knows her said, hey, you know, I'm going to introduce you to her. get some work together, and maybe we can talk about you doing a show there. And I was like, hell yeah, let me do that. Let me get some
Yeah.
work together, but with very little confidence in my work, even though I was pretty decent at the time. So I get all this, and I'm a portrait artist first and foremost. That's kind of what I do. I draw people. So I get all this work together, get a meeting with her, and I'm like nervous as shit, man. I mean, I'm just like, so I get in this meeting, start showing her all this work, and she goes, you know what? I'll be honest with you. You're a great artist, but you're just not what we're looking for. I mean, portraits are not the thing, I mean, nobody really, it just doesn't, portraits and gallery. I don't know how much you know about the art world, but those two things don't really go together. Like, they're looking for more
Abstract.
yes, exactly. Interesting stuff to look at. So she said, um, I can't, that's not really the type of stuff we show. And she said, and to be honest with you, there's a lot of galleries that don't really touch that type of work. So, it kind of knocked me down a couple notches. And so I talked to a few people, and, at the time, Beyond Baroque, they had a gallery upstairs, which I think they still do. And I talked to Richard Modiano at the time, who was, head of stuff going on at Beyond Baroque. And he said, hey, our space is your space. So if you need wall space for a show, it's there, just give me some dates. So I started thinking about it, and I'm like, I've never seen anything where poetry and art is put together in some kind of creative way. And I started thinking, at that time I was living in Leimert Park, going to the World Stage every week. Like, that's how I got my book together. I don't know if you've heard of the World Stage.
Yeah, I've been there, and I've seen actually. I know I've seen you at Beyond Baroque, and I think I saw you perform at the World Stage. And there's a ton of YouTube videos of you reading at the World Stage too.
Yes. So that was home for me, and that's kind of where I workshop my book. So a lot of the poets that I really admired were world stage poets like Kamal Daoud. I mean, Connie Williams, A.K. Tony. These guys were like, they were like my poetry idols. These are the guys I looked up to. So I said, what if I did a show where I painted some of the poets that I really admired, like those guys. And I kind of started shopping it around, and it kind of got some traction, so talked to Richard at Beyond Baroque. At that time, I was doing some stuff at the Last Bookstore downtown. So I talked to, the guy that was in charge there, and he said, yeah, you could have some wall space here. So I thought, you know what? I'm not going to go so much for the galleries, but I'm going to go for places that I do work with. And, there's some bookstores that I did work with, and they said, yeah, we'll give you some space on the wall. So I kind of sidestepped the gallery scene and just kind of went for places that I knew would want to show my work. So maybe a year later, I had all these paintings, and you could see a few behind me, like this, my buddy right here, Rafael Alvarado, and this is Ellen Mabey on the other side, who's also a Beyond Baroque poet. And these were some S.A. Griffin, who ended up buying the portrait I did of him. And actually, a lot of the poets who I painted, they actually bought their, the work.
Well, come on. I mean, it's like, who's too good to have a portrait done of them, Who's like, oh, please, I can't possibly. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a huge honor,
So Mike Sonskin, who was writing for KCET at the time, he came to one of the shows, and he decided to do a piece on it. And side story, at that time, I was also doing a blog talk show similar to what you do, but there wasn't any video. It was just like poets that would call in, and we talk about their book. So at that time, I was able to get a sit down with Nikki Giovanni, and I got to sit down with Amiri Baraka. I mean, some really, really like well-known Black poets, agreed to do my show. So Amiri was going to be in town for, I think it was a festival, a poetry festival. And I thought to myself, well, why not do a portrait of Amiri Baraka also? So that got a lot of traction. I did a portrait for him and presented it to him previous to the festival. So all these things in the art world kind of give you a little bit more footing. So those things really did a lot for me, and it opened a lot of doors. So just doing so much work with poets, and then I think it was like 2013. Punk Hostage Press was doing a opening at Beyond Baroque, and one of their first poets. Gosh, what was the guy's name? I wrote it down. I have a horrible memory. He has recently passed. What was his name? Gosh, I cannot. For the life of me, I can't remember the guy's name.
Well,
But
you'll think of it. I'm sure
yeah,
later in the conversation. Just shout it
yeah.
out.
So anyway, he was putting out a chapbook, and I was approached and asked, "Can you do a cover for the chap?" And I'd never done anything like that before. And I said, you know what? Why not? Just like on a whim. And I did this skull painting, literally, man, like within a day. Like I just kind of like knocked it out. And that ended up being the cover of the chap. And he was so thankful for the work that I did for the chap, and everybody wanted one at the reading. He ended up actually doing a tattoo of the cover work on the back of his skull.
Oh my God.
Like,
Wow.
he actually did a tat of the skull for his book cover on. And for me, that was like such a compliment, man. Like amazing. Like
You can't get any more thankful than
no, no,
that.
no, 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 no. It was amazing. But what that did for me is it kind of like let the poets know that I'd started doing covers. So that was kind of my first book cover that I ever did, and ever since then, man, like going back to your original question, I get approached by poets a lot. um, and a lot of poets that I don't know. Okay, I'm introvert by nature, and a lot of times there has to be some relationship that I have with that poet, whether it be through their publisher, through someone I know. But I often tell them, very rarely do I work with poets that I don't have some sort of relationship with. Like I kind of have to know you. And that's just because I've had some bad experiences. You know how poets are. You're part of that
Yes, I
world.
do.
And
A small
everybody,
community in a large city. Yeah.
yeah, and their books are their babies, and a lot of times their work isn't for me. I don't align myself with it, and I have to be blunt with them a lot of times. I'm like, I have to feel it, and if I don't, I really can't work with you, and I apologize, and surprisingly, a lot of them, they'll throw money at me too, like, hey, and I'm like, okay, that's nice, but I'm sure there's an artist out there that's willing to work with you, but it's
Yeah, I
not.
mean, if it doesn't speak to you, you don't want to like force yourself to make inauthentic work in a response to that.
Exactly. So yeah, I do get approached a lot.
So let me ask you this. So do you remember when and where you were first exposed to creative writing and open mics? Was that in Los Angeles or was it in another city? Or did you stumble into a library or to a cafe or, a book festival? Do you have any kind of those early memories?
Okay, well, I grew up in Leimert Park. Went to Dorsey High. I mean, I'm a local LA kid. So like high school, I graduated in 91, and at that time, early 90s, um, the world stage in Leimert Park was really booming, man. I mean, that whole spoken word scene was just kind of coming around, and Black poetry was really making a lot of headway in Los Angeles. So I think I was living in Leimert Park at the time and just strolling through Degnan one night. I think it was a Wednesday night when they do the workshop over there, and I literally stumbled in on the Wednesday night and Nancy Ryder's workshop in Leimert Park, and Peter Harris, who recently passed away. I don't know if you remember Peter Harris, but amazing poet. He was being featured that night, and I think Kamal Daoud, who's the no, I think he was reading also, and Connie Williams was on the bill. I mean, really, some of the greatest Black poets.
Heavy hitters. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and they were just there that night, and I sat in the back, and I was just blown away, like at just what they were able to give off to the audience and how it made me feel. And I think at that time I was dabbling in poetry. Like I that side of creative writing was just kind of coming to me. Hip hop was a big thing for me. So I was listening to a lot of 90s hip hop. And, back then it was more poetic than I think hip hop is these days. So that spoke to me also. And I'm like, okay, how do I give off that kind of energy through writing? And I started going to the workshop every Wednesday. I think it took me literally years before I ever stepped on that stage. Like I would just sit there and watch. I would go there, like at that time I had two little girls. I was living in Leimert Park, and on Wednesday night I'd pick them up from school, and I think that they could even remember this. Like we'd go to the workshop, they'd be in the back doing their homework, and I'd be sitting in the workshop, like so they grew up in the world stage. A lot of those poets, they still ask me, like, how are your girls, and they're grown now, but they literally grew up in that world of poetry, which is amazing. Like,
That's a testament to them that they even well, number one, just even ask, but they wouldn't even ask if they didn't care, if they didn't have that connection, like with that sense of community and family, you know what I mean?
yeah, exactly. So that's kind of where it started for me, and it eventually led me right into that world. Just meeting people, LA poetry community is a community in itself. So you meet one person, you get connected to this other, and it just went from there, man. And I say by about 2012, I was so immersed in that world. I mean, I was hosting like maybe 3 readings at that time.
Oh my God.
I was doing the Beyond Baroque. I was hosting their workshop on Wednesday nights. I think it might have been Thursday at that time. And then on first Sunday of every month, I was doing their open reading. I think I was hosting a reading at the last bookstore. So I just had all these connections, but
I mean, you slept, right?
uh, not a lot.
That's a lot.
Between the poetry and the art that I was trying to, but you know what that eventually leads to is a burnout. I
Oh
mean,
God, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So by about 2015, man, I mean, I was so burned out. Like and what it led me to do is really step back from the poetry world. Um, and I still write. Like I've been working on a second manuscript literally for years. Um, but I think about the rigmarole of going through, like pushing a book.
But it's not as bad as it was like physically. I think for better or for worse with COVID and everything, and we've kind of become, for better or for worse, media obsessed hamsters.
True. True.
So there is a lot more stuff we can do like this, and that all kind of came out of being stuck at home. But I would just encourage you to get something out there because I think that you have a lot to say and people want to hear it and people love you and they love your work. So on that score, please finish that manuscript and get it out there.
Yeah.
A little Billy Burgos plug there.
Well, having video of this, I'm sure helps. Like it definitely is a kick in the ass to do that. But when you are kind of an introverted person, you can so easily just get stuck in that shell of yourself, and with art, you don't necessarily have to be so vocal. Like you can let the art speak for itself. And then again, back to that whole social media aspect, like I've gotten so used to just throwing art on my pages and not really having to speak vocally. And getting married in the past 4 years has really just has internalized me so much that you kind of step away from poetry in that way, at least for me. And the art has become kind of like the focal point of who I am as a creative person. But I still write. I write every day, just like I do art every day. Like kind of what I do now with the art. When I do a warm up for whatever work I'm working on, I'll do like a 1 hour. Like literally, I'm sitting here just sketching as we speak. Like that's just kind of what I do. So these little 1 hour warm-ups that I do have become what I'm known for on social media, like 60-minute sketches that I post on TikTok and Instagram, and people love them, man. I mean, but what it caused me to do was start working on a smaller scale, like I've had some issues with my back in the past few years. And previous to that, I used to work on these huge, like this size painting, like 18 by 20 and sometimes even bigger. And I used to work in paint and acrylics and pastels. But because I had back issues that would plague me when I would work that big, like I would finish a painting and I would be down for like 2 weeks, with horrible chronic back pain. So it forced me to size down. So now I literally only work like your book cover. I only work that size, and I started working more in ink, doing cross hatching, which has kind of become what I'm known for, is the cross hatching style. Most of the artwork in your book is that cross hatching. So you kind of have to reinvent yourself constantly.
But I also think from what you're saying too, that I think it happens organically. You're talking about back issues, you're talking about pain, you're talking about restrictions. But I think the artists and it's very important. I always tell people, don't give up. There's always options. So if you can't do what you did before, it doesn't mean you are diminished or less than. It just means like you pivot, you find something else. And it's like you're talking about the size of a book, but well, here's an example. I mean, look what the Beatles were able to accomplish in a 3-minute time frame. Granted, they wrote longer songs and had crazy experimental stuff too, but 99% of their work is that 3 or 3.5 minute time frame, and it's like you can do amazing things.
Yes. Yeah.
Anything is possible, But I want to circle back to something you said earlier, and me not having been in Los Angeles for a while. You mentioned Beyond Baroque, and I've been there several times. I saw you read there, but Have you noticed in the last few years, since the lockdown lifted, that are there newer readings popping up at bookstores and cafes, or is it getting more diminished? Is everything kind of going more online through Zooms and things like that that you've seen?
Well, from what I've seen, that scene in itself has become more like this. A lot of people do more readings via the computer or Zoom. Um, and I think as a whole, that scene has kind of suffered since COVID. I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not as active, like I said, as I used to be. But to get invested, to put gas in your car and drive, I mean, just of course, the fires, I think, are reshaping LA as a whole right now. I mean, I can't even imagine what that's going to do to the creative world. But previous to these fires, I think it took a lot for people to invest themselves in going physically to a reading. For me, it did. But there's certain ones that are still really booming. Like I think what Library Girl is one of those readings that I think has really persevered. And I've done a few of those readings for Susan.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And literally, it doesn't matter what month, what time of year, it literally sells out every time. So what Susan Hayden's doing, I think, is still a big thing. So readings that I think have persevered, like La Palabra and Avenue 50, I think still gets a lot of people.
And Two Idiots Peddling Poetry in Orange County. It's
Yes,
been going on for
there you
years and
go.
years, and Ben and Steve are doing an amazing job with that still. So
So I think the ones that have been around and that have persevered, I think people put a lot of respect on those still. The newer ones, I think they kind of struggle with getting an audience.
well, they got to get that name out there, because I can't remember the name of the one that's in Redondo Beach, and I really like it at the coffee shop there. But
Yeah, I can't remember the name either.
man, if you're in the middle of some heart wrenching thing and that coffee grinder goes off, you're just like, oh. And you got to keep your damn mouth shut because it's like, you can't say crap because
Yeah.
it's a business. They're
Uh-huh.
there to make money, sell sandwiches,
Yeah.
steaks, coffee, and you're just the light entertainment. But it's just like
Mhm.
you're just ripping your guts out, and then it's like what? You're
Exactly.
like, but you can't say
Exactly.
anything, man. It's a business.
Uh-huh.
But if you haven't ever been to the Pondwater reading in West Covina that Joanne
I've
Baines
heard,
hosts,
but I've never been. Yeah.
she's been doing that for I think more 15, 20 years. That's a fantastic reading. Lots of great poets out there. There's a lot of stuff that's still going on, but yeah, I do kind of wonder if maybe a lot of the newer readings are just maybe kind of just attached at the hip to the colleges. Maybe that's kind of where some of those bars and restaurants and coffee shops and stuff kind of on campus. So maybe they don't have to advertise because they get so much foot traffic.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
really know, um, but if you have a poem that you'd like to read, I don't want to go through this whole thing without you having reading one, and then I'll ask you a question about the book afterwards. I kind of want you to read something first from it.
Yeah, yeah,
People get
yeah.
a taste from it.
Um, let's see here. I'll read this one. It actually came to me because of what we're dealing with here in Southern California right now, with fires. But I think what these fires have done is let the world kind of know what we in Southern California always deal with. Like fires are part of life for us. And I don't think people realize that. Like fires happen. This, of course, is on a massive level that, even we've never seen. But fires are part of life here in Southern California.
Much more prevalent than earthquakes. I don't know if people
Yeah,
realize that. I mean, the devastation I think is one news commentator kind of, said it's could be if it keeps going like this, it could be on the level of something like Pompeii, where is granted you're not going to have people buried under molten lava, but the street level devastation is going to be
Yeah,
years in the making to clean up. So
yeah, yeah. So I often have at least two or three poems a year that I end up writing about fire. This one is in my book. It's called "What Fire Does." The sky opened up like an apricot. In its recalcitrance, it only gives the heavy fruit, the veil of ember, the remains of its waste succumb. It closes up the heavens, closes the prism of hope that is our filter. When without this, there is no passage for prayer, no permanence, no mortar that binds together a life's course. This is what fire does when it destroys in the distance and instinctively brings its embers to our doorway like a prized kill. This pattern that mirrors that of people who exist on the ashy hips of breathing volcanoes. A life, no matter how prosperous, that only breeds the seed of doubt. This is what fire does, allowing us to tend its flame, letting its blue hypnotize our senses, but nothing more. And that is how our days end here, with our families huddled around this campfire in our television, watching it eat brush, eat lives, eat hope, watching California burn on the end of a tending twig.
wow, it is a great poem and it's very timely. Thank you for
Yes,
reading that.
yeah. And like I said, every year, if you live here in California and you're a poet, man, you have one of these poems that where you just kind of have to sit back and like, man, I got to write about this, like, because it's such a part of our life that, um, and a lot of times I think when you live in a place like California, it's easy to get callous to these things, and something has to outdo the other massive event. But you try your hardest not to become. And I think when we write as poets, we kind of like center ourselves again in what it is that we're feeling. And that's kind of to me what art does for us as artists to begin with. Like it takes something that we could easily be so callous about, and it kind of puts it back into our heart, and then centers it again. And whenever I even read a poem like this, like, damn, like it kind of brings it all back to life for me.
And
So
I agree. And because I think one thing as artists, creatives, writers, that we're always kind of butting heads against is the 24-hour news cycle.
yes,
Um, and I don't want to be, again, like you were saying, callous about it, but once the fires are out, that doesn't mean the devastation stops or the people stop suffering or people are going to suddenly not be misplaced from their homes. And I can relate to that because it was very scary here last September and October when Hurricane Helene came through and just mowed down Augusta, Aiken, a lot of the surrounding towns, and people were displaced. We didn't have, water, power, electricity, internet for weeks and weeks and weeks. And, I had said, it got a little scary when the crime rate started to go up and people were shooting each other at gas stations. I mean, it was scary
yeah,
stuff. And it's sad to think that, yeah, it was a natural disaster, but it's the same thing with an earthquake, with a fire, with a flood, with a hurricane, whatever. Um, when you take away people's distractions, it's sadly incredible how quickly they show you who they really are.
agreed, agreed.
But yeah, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about this with Eulogy to an Unknown Tree about it deals about loss and grief, and it's something that I've thought about with my book because what I went through that inspired the poems in the book was 2023. And then I finished writing it in early 2024. It
Hmm.
went to April, the editing, everything went through another process. It went to you to do the artwork, and this is how books go. And
Yes.
so it came out in September, but then we had the hurricane, and so just now getting to the promotion of it, and just now getting out to the open mics and stuff. But um, I want to pick your brain about this too, because it's something that I've really thought about. So
Hmm.
um, at what point, when you have a collection that deals with so much about loss and grief, do you feel inside that you can wrest those poems from your set? And I won't say you would never read them again, or that you are embarrassed by them. It's just we as people, we carry this stuff with us, these experiences. But one of the things I've tried to tell, and just my own family and friends too, it's like, if I didn't think that there were ever going to be any more sunny days, my life would have
Hmm.
been a real hell. But knowing that I was getting out of the situation and I could look back to work on this stuff, but I'm very proud of this book. And I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I think it's probably the most important thing that I've written in terms of like, because it can help people, but I do other things. And so I think that, asking you about this book that you have about grief, loss, suffering, when that cycle of writing the book, putting the book together, getting the book out there, talking about the open mics and stuff and promoting it and everything, but you are more than just the Billy that wrote that one book. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You are a sum of parts. You have your experience doesn't stop the day that the book comes out. You have new experiences. You grow. So, at what point were you going? Maybe a year, 6 months, whatever later. You're like, I have other ideas. I write other poems. I'm writing this. I'm doing that. I paint. I draw. So let me ask you, like the aftermath, I guess is what I'm trying to get at for that book. I mean, you knew that there would be sunny days, and your friends and your family would help you pull through it. But it's like when you go to an open mic now. Let's say if you had a feature, you wouldn't only just read poems from that one book.
Yeah, for me, kind of going back to the whole recreating yourself thing, like I think, okay, you mentioned music. I think artists that I really admire, musical artists, are the ones that they're not like a one-trick pony, like they're constantly reinventing themselves, and you kind of never know what you're gonna get. And I think as a poet, or even as an artist, period, whether it be art or poetry, I think you have to keep growing. Um, and the book I did 12 years ago was about, basically my father's death, and how I dealt with that. And I kind of saw it kind of how people that have faith think about prayer, like, I have to pray, and or maybe go into therapy. I always say I hate how when people describe poetry as therapy, but in this case, it applies. You kind of have to get it out of your system. And to me, if you don't grow away from that, then you're kind of still stuck in that in that mold of what you wrote about. And I found myself after the book still being stuck in that, writing poems about grief for maybe another year or two. I mean, I was kind of like, it was like kind of being bogged down and not being able to move. And I think when something major happens, like for me, uh, 2019, when COVID hit, I think it kind of like was a slap in the face, um, even as a creative. And I started writing a lot more about that situation. And then 2020, which is when I got married, um, it totally reinvented who I was as a poet. And, a lot of my poems became about love. which is a whole different kind of of poetry. And I even saw that affect even the way I was sketching at the time. Like 2020, I don't know what it was before COVID, but dating in 2019 and 2020 was like so I was doing all these sketches of my wife at the time because I couldn't see her, like here in Southern California, if you live an hour away from someone, that could literally be on the other side of the country.
Oh yeah.
With the way Southern California is built, like if you live an hour or two away from someone, you could literally be living in New York, and it's kind of the same distance for us. So not being able to see her meant I sketched her a lot. Like I was doing these portraits. So I saw a reinventing of who I was as a writer and as an artist. But the poet I am now is so far removed from the poet I was when I wrote this book that sometimes I read these poems and I can hardly identify the person that I was at that time. But I kind of got it out of my system. And I don't know how you are as a writer, but for me, it's kind of like an exorcism, like you exercise it out of your system. And then if you don't grow from it, then I think you're going to struggle
Oh
as a
yeah.
writer.
I agree. I mean, when I first got to South Carolina, I still had some major like PTSD issues and waking up in the middle of the night, like the first couple weeks I was here and thinking people were gonna jump me and that I was getting messed with at a, shelter or sleeping on the street under a bench or something like that, and waking up and realizing, oh, I'm in a guest room. I'm okay. I'm not going to be. But I think I even said that in my afterword, and I've said it on other podcasts and stuff, that when I was done writing that book, I was done because so many people were like, "Nah, it's only 20 something poems," and I was like, "Only?"
Yeah, right.
Like, do you have any idea what kind of hell I had to go through just to get that out? And then to revisit it once I was in a safe place. I wrote one new poem when I got to South Carolina about the experience, which was looking back, called We're Still Cool Long Beach,
Hmm.
because it's one of those things where I can't be mad at a city. It's just brick and pavement and trees and
Exactly.
beach. It's just things.
Yeah.
But I kind of framed it in a way of like a relationship, like a romantic relationship.
Yeah.
But and to me that made it a little bit easier. And I already had all the crazy stuff I was dealing with, and I was like, you know what? Eventually I'm gonna go back to California and I'm gonna go back to Long Beach. But I mean, believe it or not, some people who don't really know me, when the book promotion stuff started to come out, especially after I had my interview with April and I had it up here on the channel,
Hmm.
and I got messages from people like, "Hey, man, so you going to go to the Salvation Army and donate some time and serve some food and this and that?" And was like, "Those are awesome suggestions,
Yeah.
but me as a person, I am not ready for that yet. That is, I've never fought in a war. I've never been a soldier, but I would not want to go back to the scene of the crime, so to
Yeah.
speak. And it's
Yeah.
nothing to do with those people. I've never met those people. I've never been in those buildings here in South Carolina, but it would just suddenly feel like this encroaching, kind of like acute, kind of like, oh my God, I need to get out of here. That
Yeah.
anxiety. And I've gone past places and I've dropped off books to donation centers and libraries and things like that. I can do that. But to be in there for like hours and hours and hours, like I can sit and I can rap with a homeless person. I can talk about like options and social services and getting your driver's license and getting your life back together. But it's still too fresh for me
Yeah.
to immerse myself in that. And it doesn't make me a better person. It doesn't make me high and mighty or think that I'm all that. It just means like, you know what? It's just too soon. And it's hard to explain that to somebody if they've never been through it.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, as a poet, I think that form of writing, poetry in itself, okay. I'm not saying I've never tried writing other styles, like on like uh, a novel or something like that. But I think when you write poetry, it's such a personal thing. Like, even if you're not writing about your life personally, it just takes a lot out of you. Like, it sucks you dry. And depending on the subject matter of what you're writing about, and I think this goes back to why I suffered from that burnout after 2012. I mean, I was just spent, man. I mean, and I think that's what you're describing too with this book. Like, you're so spent after getting all that out. Um, and the book itself, you know, raising this child to adulthood, and you're so spent that you just kind of have to take a break. And whatever you do to take that break, whether it be going into other aspects of creativity, for me, it was art, sketching, you know, just being quiet and just drawing, you know, getting back to that love of just, and also for me is just kind of living life, you know, like, enjoying family, you know, and it sounds very corny, I guess, to some people, but to me, a poet has to learn to live the life that they're writing about also. And I think a lot of poets, they get into this thing of just writing. But if you don't have anything to write about, if you're not living the life that feeds into your poetry, then who are you really? You know, like, so I say take as much time as you need, man. I mean, only now within the past few years have I gotten back into a pattern of trying to piece together these poems that I've written in the past few years and thinking, okay, what am I going to do with these poems? You know, like these, how do I put this together and recreate this poet that I am now? And who knows, man? I mean, people might not like the poet that I am now. You know, they
I
might
think no
not.
matter what, man, people are going to be always curious to see what you're up to because you're so enmeshed in the community, man. People love you, and you know, if we didn't allow for people to change, then what are we doing here on this planet? You know what I mean? Well, let me ask you this because this will feed right into that. So, do you find yourself creating artwork that is just for you and not to share online with the outside world, like just to express something, either to write it or to draw it just for you? Might not want to show anybody, might not want to take a picture with your phone and be like, look, mom, look what I did, and put it up on the fridge kind of thing. It's like you've had this feeling, you chase the feeling, you got it down, and then you can set it aside, you can admire it, you can do something with it. But I think it's important that we have these things as artists that we just create because number one, you got to serve yourself. You've got to, you know, you're your own harshest critic. You know,
Oh
you're
yeah.
doing it because you get something out of it. You know what I mean?
uh Honestly, I used to be that way, uh before the internet. But what I've noticed as an artist that really helps, okay, for me, I'm part of a lot of these online sketch groups where people show their sketches. And when I was struggling to sketch, or you know, we all get in these moments where we don't want to do anything, or nothing we're either writing or creating is good, or at least we think it is. We get in these ruts. We look for other artists to inspire us. And for me, what always helped me to get out of those ruts was looking at artists doing bad work. You know, work that they think is shit, you know, and what it did for me is it helped me to see that what I might think is something not so good, another artist that is maybe not where I am creatively is going to look at and say, damn, that is good. Like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, like, I'm trying to reach where you are. Um, so yeah, as much as I don't want to share that with, say, social media or other artists, I think that is what helps them to grow, because you know, I can only see the trees in the forest that I'm in. Like,
Right.
sometimes I step out and say, hey, you know, there's other people that are looking at me and thinking, damn, like, I want to be where you are,
And also sometimes it's like it's something that you're working on, you might not be 100% finished, but you just have that raw, visceral kind of verbal vomit, whatever you want to call it, and get it
Yeah.
out of you. And it might not be edited, it might not be pretty, it might not be contained in a nice little box, but you get it out there for somebody to read and they go, oh, damn. And they
Mhm.
go, well, he was really feeling it and it's raw and it may not have, 4 syllable adjectives on every line, but it's like
Yeah.
he was feeling it and it
Mhm.
got out into something. And, it doesn't have to be beautiful. Art is just what you take out of it. Let somebody else call it art, whatever you
There
do
you
to
go.
get it out,
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So with things like COVID or the LA fires, I had to write this one down. It's a long-winded one. Is there a visceral, gut-wrenching pull to get the feelings out of work instantly, like when these things happen? Or do you feel like they get quashed down and they have to percolate? Like if you read the poem about a fire, but let's say you saw something else happen. Is that something where you see like an uncomfortable exchange at a grocery store, or you're just out walking in the park and something funny happens, or whatever? Do you feel like you have to just chase that feeling down and get home right away, or even just the notes on your phone? Or will you just think of a line or two and let it percolate, and then you'll get to it when you get to it?
I think that also has changed over the years. I used to be the type of writer where I always carried a little notebook with me or on my phone, and but as I've gotten older, stuff needs to like you said, percolate for a while. Like I often say, it needs to cook for a minute.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times now, and even the way I make decisions in my 50s is different than how I did when I was 30, say. So and even my wife often tells me, like she'll hit me with these questions or these life decisions, and I'm often like, let me think about it.
Give me a minute. Yeah, that kind
Yeah,
of
give me a
thing.
minute to think about this. So I think as I've gotten older creatively, I often have to think about something for a while. And to me, that makes for better art, artwork. Like for instance, I'm working on this album cover at the moment. Um, and I can't talk about it really because it's business, but this album, it's a spoken word artist. But I have literally been sitting with his work for months, just like letting it feed me and piecing together reference pictures. Um, but I've noticed that I need time a lot more than I did before. And to me, that makes for better work. Um, like for your book, I mean, just trying to discover that bag that I was going to use, it took time. I mean, I'm like, that one doesn't really work, or so you kind of have to feel. For me personally, I have to feel it, and that takes time. I mean, feelings don't pop into my head quickly anymore. And I think you have to give me. I have to give the work time. I have to sit with it for a while. And creatively, I think that is done. It's made for better work. So yeah, I'm not quick to just start. But yeah, I do daily sketches, but those are just it's kind of like just something I do to kind of get like what do you call it when you're a piano player? Like
Noodling?
where I can't think of the word, but
You have to, you just coming up with a demo,
yeah,
sketching it out. Yeah.
or where you're just learning how to make your fingers do the work of touching the keys, like
Yeah, just finger placements. The same thing with the guitar. Yeah.
yeah. So
You're
to
just
me,
learning how to make the chord shapes.
yeah. So to me, that's what my sketches are. But if I'm working on a project, it takes time. Like so I have to sit with it for a while before I can before it can become something I think of any worth. if that answers
Oh, that completely answered. That was fantastic. Well, before we wrap it up here, if you would like, I'd love to have you read one more poem for the folks. I know that they're probably hungry for more.
Yeah. I'll read this one since I was talking about my daughter. Um, Now that she's a grown woman and living her life, maybe one day I'll send her this link and she'll see that I still think about her, even though she's an adult. I think our kids sometimes think that, because they're off doing life, that we don't really think about them.
And that's all we think about, it's because we're
Yeah.
always worried. We're always hoping that they're making the right decisions and eating the right, even though
Right.
we hated when our parents told us to eat your vegetables.
Exactly.
As parents, we're like, eat your vegetables.
And that was her on the cover of my
Oh,
book.
okay. Wow.
That's her as a 4-year-old. So this one is about her. It's called Little Mama. You are seraphic blue through the ultraviolet embrasure, holding back an open sluice of firmament like damask, a cross-hatching of light in dunks and skinny denim, carpool lane crony, stand-in penumbra of ride or die chick, filling out features that your moms laid out before me like a challenge. We are loitering around the adolescent timeline like hood rat equestrians, bunny hopping over the red knots that separate you from youth. After each read of your tweeny bot memoir, I flip you over with knotted brow, scanning your biblio for at best a byline shout out. I know, I'm just some unlucky draw from a witch doctor's thrown chicken bones, an unfinished man like my father was. But soon enough, I will crawl inside the threads of myself with a bottle like he did. I'll need you then to lead my buckshot riddled pirogue through a phalanx of bottle brush trees that sprout from my stagnant waters, where I will quince años waltz you through the vestibule of womanhood.
Wow. Yeah, there can be no doubt you are a great father. That is amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I do have one little thing to wrap everything up here, and you've been an awesome guest, which is what is coming up next for you, and where can people find your work online?
Well, I do have Instagram, but I don't know what the Chinese know about me at this point, but TikTok was doing it for me for a while. Like I had a great following, but from what I've heard, come the 19th, they might be kaput. So, but TikTok is probably the easiest place where I get the most traction from my artwork, um, and Facebook. I have a pretty most of the work I do comes through Facebook. I know a lot of poets via Facebook. So I'm all over social media, man. You can find me anywhere. That's but other than that, that's pretty much it.
You got anything else coming up? Are you planning on going to open mics or galleries? Or I know the fires are making that not so easy right now, but I mean, I don't know, maybe even online you might want to be doing some stuff or
uh Poetry wise, I like I said, I haven't been doing a whole lot. I am working on a few album covers. I have a book cover that I'm working on. I'm also working on a children's book, which I've done multiple for my friend Randy Jurado, um, a Central American writer that I've done. Gosh, at this point, I think we've done about 8 books together.
wow.
Um, but I'm working on one that talks about my childhood growing up in LA. Um, Talks about the growing up during the riots. So kind of like a children's book version of a memoir
Very
that
cool.
I'm working on illustrating, so I always have something in the fire, man. But and I'm always in talks with different poets, like I said, doing cover work. But I try to keep names and stuff private until I don't want to give birth to their babies too soon, I guess you could
Or
say.
yeah, jeopardize what maybe something might be in the process, and like, oh no, we decided to go another direction.
Yeah, yeah. And I do a lot of portrait work too, privately for people. So I'm always working, man, on art, and scheduling is always an issue, being a husband and a dad. So it's a lot.
That's
It's a
life, though, man. It's just we
lot.
are, our decisions and our choices, and how much time we decide to give to every single little thing, including eating and sleeping.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whenever we can squeeze that in.
But I really want to say thank you. I'll go ahead and thank you on behalf of April Skies. Everything that you've not only done for my book, but for the LA poetry and art community at large. Just huge shout out for everything that you've done, currently doing, and probably will be doing
Yeah.
in the future. And again, thank you for coming on the show. It's been long overdue, and I just want to say, man, you're awesome, and just enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much. And you do the same. You do the
Thank
same.
you. Take it easy, Billy.
All right, man.
Bye.